All right. Then we have another one. How well does Parallels work with like heavy rendering applications, Autodesk, Revit, SolidWorks, those type of
Works great. We get this question a lot. So the general question is, does it support GPUs? And the answer is yes, because there's really no requirement for RAS to do anything with GPUs. So if you have a GPU that your application needs, so you're running Revit, right, or you're running AutoCAD, um, as long as the hypervisor platform or the physical machine that you're connecting to can support that graphics card and get it through the operating system to your application, then RAS won't interfere with that. So that'll work just as it normally does. We also have the ability, because of the protocol that's used behind the scenes, which is RDP, to use GPU resources to help optimize the RDP traffic across the network. So compression and decompression of actual RDP frames can also be supported through a GPU to make the actual bandwidth um, requirement smaller. We do have MSPs, and I'm thinking of one off the top of my head that is a service provider of engineering firms, and a lot of them work in the field. So they do a lot of construction and oil rig work, but they are running AutoCAD, they're running Revit to do annotations on drawings in the field, and they're all doing that with Parallels RAS.
awesome. And are there any migration tools from Horizon to RAS?
Not directly. We do have some scripting up on our corporate GitHub. You can see some PowerShell scripts that can help you pull data out of your existing environment and import it into RAS. What I've found, though, for customers that are doing this, even for customers that are fairly large, the actual time it takes to build things in the RAS environment through the admin console is so simple that you don't really save any time by trying to pull data out of your old environment. Because think of what you're trying to pull. You're not just getting the names of the applications and the path to the application. There's also host names, right? There's networking information. But what if that changed? What if I was launching an app from app server number one, but when I move to my new environment, I want to rename it and now it's called RDSH01 or it's called Engineering 01. You would have to go in and manually translate every host to the new host name, every IP address to a new IP address. And so far, from a practicality perspective, we haven't seen any customer do that. We've had a few that have tried and they discovered that there's too many variables and they spend more time trying to code it or try to pull existing data and then modify it to go to the new environment when they could have already had the full environment built manually, just going straight to the admin console and building it. And that's true if you have 100 concurrent users or if you have 10,000. We did a Citrix migration manually in 21 days for over 7,000 licenses last quarter, just by building it from scratch. Um, Also, I'll mention that the infrastructure piece, doing it the part through the admin console, is a very, very fast portion of it. Where you spend most of your time is on the endpoints, right? If you're moving from Citrix to RAS, for example, I might have the Workspace app installed on 10,000 endpoints. How do I remove that? How do I reconfigure it? How do I deploy the Parallels client? How do I let my users know what their new user experience is going to be when they come into the office on Monday? How do I catch them when they're not busy to make changes to their endpoint? Things like that. That's usually where the migration takes the longest amount of time. Building the infrastructure, moving application servers, you can do that in an hour. We had one customer do a different one of their business units every weekend. He just moved 2 or 3 app servers on a Saturday, and the new group would pick up on Monday at their new login prompt. But that's the transition that usually takes time. The infrastructure piece is very quick, and we have yet to see someone, at least I haven't, uh, try to automate it because the automation has so many variables that you end up spending a lot of time making corrections or adjusting things anyway, when you could have just built it from scratch in an hour. We build these environments all day long. For me to build a 10,000 user environment, it might take an hour. So it's not like Citrix, for example, or a VMware with a 20 node cluster or something like that, where there's a lot of infrastructure to build. It's very quick. So you don't have to worry about how difficult the process is because you're going to do it by hand before that, difficult scripting or the migration tool configuration was ever finished. So The quick answer is we do have some options available, but most people don't use them because as they transition from one environment to the other, there's too many variables that they have to adapt to, that they find it much easier just to build a new environment very quickly and then move application servers and other infrastructure boxes from one environment to the other.
Right. Then how well does Zoom and Teams integrate into RAS?
Video conferencing is challenging right now. Um, Normally, if people have a high dependency on video conferencing, the first answer is let's try and run the video conferencing on the endpoint. Let's not run it hosted in the session. We do have customers using Teams inside the session. It takes a little bit beefier network to be able to do that. And Teams is also a resource hog. So the hosts, when you're running 25 users on a single host and they're all running Teams at the same time, does require some additional configuration and resources. But our recommended stance is to try and offload it to the endpoint. We would do that either by running it on endpoint outside the session completely or trying to integrate the session hosted applications and the Teams on the endpoint through URL redirection. So if I opened an email and I had that link to join this meeting now, when I clicked it, it would actually open Teams on the endpoint. And we do that through URL redirection. Citrix used to do that, and they still do it on-prem through a VDA hook, and so does VMware with Horizon. The solution has always been try and offload it to the endpoint. Right now, as Microsoft has moved and pushed people to the cloud, Citrix and VMware are the only two licensed vendors that have access to the Teams optimization software stack. So if you do their platforms in the cloud, you'll also get Teams optimization through the session, but they're the only ones that offer it. So unless you're going to, if you're trying to move from Citrix or move from VMware, there's no vendor that has that option available. So Teams is a tricky one. For Zoom actually does really well. The Zoom plugin in the browser works really well through a hosted session because of the way they transfer media isn't the same as Teams or RingCentral or GoToMeeting. So we've had pretty good success with customers that are using Zoom.
Fantastic. And then for some of those graphics related workloads, is RemoteFX or OpenGL being used in those situations?
Not from a GPU perspective. So you might use RemoteFX because of the video compression options, depending on what it is that you're sending across from the host to the endpoint. The RemoteFX virtual GPU function, which if you Google, you can read about it, was introduced into the RDP protocol around the 2012, 2016 timeframe. That's when it was being experimented with. Microsoft removed that because they found some security flaws. So the ability to partition GPUs and use a virtual GPU, in essence, have many virtual machines, goodness, I can't speak, sharing a physical GPU hardware. They removed that capability out of the RemoteFX portion of RDP. So it's not there. It doesn't exist today. If you want to use RemoteFX, it's really not tied to a GPU anymore. So there are some video compression algorithms that are part of RemoteFX, H.264, 265, AVCC. Some of those things will take advantage of your GPU to help make them more efficient if you have configured it to do so. But as far as actually using the GPU for your application, for Revit, for AutoCAD, for 3D modeling or whatever, that won't affect, it's not tied to RemoteFX anymore. Hopefully that answered the question.
Awesome. And then we know we can set up SSO into the application, but can SCIM be used?
Depends on the platform and how it's used. Authentication is very tricky. There's a lot of changes in authentication. People are using Okta and Duo, two big vendors out there today. And Microsoft is starting to lock down the authentication stack. So my short answer would be, I would need to look more specifically at how you want to use it to see where it would impact things. In general, if you can use something on the endpoint to authenticate, such as a smart card, such as Windows Hello, such as credentials, right? All the standard things. Those still present has credentials to the underlying authentication system once they're done, and that's the portion that we grab. So depending on where it sits in that authentication stack, it might be great. There are other things that intercept that interfere with that authentication stack, and depending on where they step into the stack, it could break the parts we need. So if you're using something to customize authentication, or if you're using, say, the Duo single sign-on component to get MFA when you log into laptops, we have to be careful with those kind of things to see what exactly they're touching and whether it's on the endpoint or it's on the host, whether you're using an external identity provider at the same time. There's a few variables there that we need to be careful of. So I would say uh, if you're using that, we would just want to have a discussion about how it's affecting how your users are using it to see if it'll impact any of our components.
Awesome. And then last question we have here, have you done any configuration or seen issues with the HP's virtual printer application?
Um, Not specifically, no. Where we start to see tricky things with printers, let me back up a step. I would say most printers that play well with Windows work fine. Vendors that are reputable, that try and keep up with drivers, that work with current operating systems are usually fine. It doesn't have to be a USB printer plugged into the endpoint. It can be an IP printer. It can be a multifunction printer sitting in the office. It can be configured on the endpoint, or it can be configured on the host. Things like follow me printing, from Konica, all of those things are very feasible in a RAS environment. Where things get tricky is if there's certain functionality in the print driver that's required to identify the printer, and whether or not the print driver blocks the operating system from finding the printer. Some drivers do that, so it'd be very specific to the printer. I haven't run into anything with HP drivers yet that have caused a problem. Dymo has been a problem in a couple of places. And I'm trying to think of the name of the other one that we just recently had. I think it was a Xerox multifunction that we had some printer issues with. But I will say in general, 99.9% of the time, we can figure it out. So whether it's a driver configuration, it's a virtual driver configuration, there's some configuration on the endpoint that needs to match with some configuration that's on the host. We have a pretty good success rate with all modern printing devices. But the devil's in the details. We would obviously set up a trial. We'd obviously test it with you to see if we can uncover any challenges that we'd run into.
Awesome. That is all the questions we have.
Great. I know there's always more. Thank you guys for letting me share it with you a little bit. If you have more questions, reach out to the Choice team. They can always reach us to get really into specifics. We can always schedule a call and just to do some discovery and talk about your environment and answer any questions you have. We'd both be glad to talk to you and help you out.